Hi, and welcome back to Grassroots Crypto, where I like to teach people about crypto. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the THORChain cap issue, some of the proposals to fix the caps issue or address it, and how the THORSwap and Olympus Pro partnership is working to help resolve the caps issue. If you're new here, don't forget to like and subscribe, and all of the links in this video will be in the description below. Lots to cover in this one, so let's just get into it. So understanding the liquidity cap. So here we have total bonded, and that's been put up by the nodes, and that protects the total pooled liquidity. And this is basically all of the liquidity pools in THORChain added together, which is the rune as well as the asset. So this protects that. And you kind of want it generally on a 2-to-1 ratio. To get new liquidity in, because the liquidity cap prevents someone from adding liquidity, either the total pool needs to reduce below the cap, which would be, withdrawing liquidity for some reason, or the total pooled needs to increase like this, because there's a relationship between the total pooled and the liquidity cap here. So you can think of it like this. This is the main takeaway from this point. With regards to the incentive pendulum, it controls the incentives from node operators to liquidity providers, and this liquidity cap kind of holds it in place. So normally, if this wasn't there, if you got to this situation, then it would be underbonded and more rewards will go to the node operators to incentivize more to come and join to increase the total bonded. If you get to a situation like this, where it's going to be overbonded, then incentives go to the liquidity providers in order to try and incentivize more liquidity providers to join to increase the total pooled. But this liquidity cap is currently holding the incentive pendulum in a specific spot. Now we understand more about liquidity caps, let's have a look about some of the proposals to address them. So the first one would be to raise the liquidity cap in order to move the incentive pendulum into more of an underbonded state, and that would push more rewards to node operators and incentivize more to join. You could recruit new node operators, and perhaps there should be an educational series on that on YouTube. Then would be increasing the reward based on bond. At the moment, it doesn't matter how much a node operator bonds in, their rewards are the same. So potentially the more they bond in, the more reward they would get. And then lastly would be the vault nodes. And that's obviously less complex nodes, require much less upfront capital. So whilst all these proposals are good to see, none of them are in practice now, and action now is needed in order to bring more liquidity into THORChain. To understand the liquidity in THORChain, it's good to have a look at a bit of a breakdown. And when doing this, we can see that a lot of liquidity is being taken up by IDOs. So first you have Xrune, and this is going to be from THORSwap. And then the latest IDO is going to be Thor from THORSwap's IDO, taking 42 million, which is second only to BTC here. So there's a lot of liquidity, particularly for Thor. When looking on this on a pie graph, you can kind of see 18% is being taken up by the Thor liquidity. It's about 10% here for Xrune. So that's 28% of pooled liquidity is taken up by IDOs. And due to the caps, it stops other liquidity being added like BTC, Ethereum, or BNB. So upon reviewing this sparked a raging debate on the THORChain dev Discord as whether it's a good idea or not, e.g. to have particularly Thor be taking up all this liquidity inside of THORChain. So then the question got raised, should nodes bonds be securing IDO liquidity, particularly in Thor's case, where there's very little volume, which outside of incentives turns into low income for liquidity providers and node operators who are securing it. And in addition, THORSwap also are providing massive amounts of incentives to the pool, so no one wants to leave anyway because of all of the insane APY that they're getting. So that's either keeping it, or should it not be allowed and room be made for key L1 assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, BNB, or L2 like synthetics, because synthetics will take up total pooled when it gets minted. So it's a big debate on Discord and went on for several days, particularly with the caps in place, because you couldn't raise the caps to get more liquidity in. In what happened to be very good timing, THORSwap released its partnership with Olympus Pro. You can read all about it here. On the surface, it just looks like a good way to get cheap Thor token. But there's much more to it when you start to dig into it. So let's have a look at the details. First, what is THORSwap? So THORSwap is an OG of the THORChain community, and they made BetSwap, and they are one of the interfaces into THORChain where you can add, swap, or remove liquidity within THORChain. As we discussed, Thor recently released a token through an IDO within THORChain, and this is how the Rune/Thor pool here got created. And I don't want to give away the ending of the video, because you can see there's a decline of liquidity here. Anyway, so that was taking up 18% of the total pool. So what is Olympus? Olympus Pro is an evolution of DeFi using bonds to get liquidity and introducing the concept of POL, protocol owned liquidity, where it owns its own liquidity, hence the name. Right, so how does Olympus Pro work? First, we need to understand how Olympus DAO works. Olympus DAO works by exchanging or bonding assets like DAI, Frax, Sushi token, whatever, in exchange for Olympus's native token, OHM. This OHM is given at a discount to market price, invested or locked up for 5 days, so you can't sell it straight away. So here you're bonding an asset for a discounted price with a time condition. Olympus DAO then gets its own assets, it gets to keep these that you've bonded in, hence Olympus has then protocol-owned liquidity. Olympus Pro takes this a step further by allowing protocols like THORSwap to do the same thing, but they can issue their own token and keep the liquidity bonded. More broadly speaking, in Olympus Pro with bonding is a mechanism in which a user can sell assets or exchange assets to a protocol in exchange for its native token. You don't fully need to understand bonding for this video. You just need to understand that you're going to give up or exchange an asset or an LP token in exchange for a discounted native token, which will be locked up for several days. Olympus Pro does take a bit of time to get your head around, and I've got a few videos or links to videos in the description below where you can find out more information about that. So have a look at the THORSwap and Olympus Pro partnership. There are 3 specific assets or tokens that can be bonded in order to get cheap Thor, and this will be vested over a 7-day period, so you can't access it until 7 days after you've bonded in. And that, again, that is to prevent just quick selling. So there's 3 assets that can be done. This is the Thor ETH Sushi Liquidity Pool token, the native ERC20 ETH, or just ETH.Rune. And then you have the Rune ETH Sushi Liquidity Pool token, and they can all be bonded in to THORSwap in exchange for discounted Thor. And then that aligns to the 3 options that you can get for discounted Thor. So before we go into this in more detail, I wanted to go through THORChain's objectives so then we can tie them to the benefits that this scheme is having to THORChain. These are some of the THORChain's objectives, particularly within this program. So that would be to remove inefficient pooled liquidity from THORChain, and that it would obviously reduce the total pool, which makes way for more liquidity. And it's considered inefficient because it has low volume, which generates low income. Second is the retirement of ETH.Rune, as Rune is most effective and liquid within THORChain. ERC20 Rune was kind of like, in my opinion, a bit of a marketing stunt. It got adoption out in Ethereum land. Things were great, but it's not actually required going forward. And 3 is to get more node operators that would lift the total bonded, and that would allow the caps to be raised to get more liquidity into the network, and then the network would grow that way. So let's have a look at a breakdown for the 3 bonding mechanisms and how they work and what they will do. So first we have the Thor ETH. And that's essentially, you take within SushiSwap, you take your Sushi Liquidity Pool token, your SLP here, and then you bond that in to get discounted Thor over a 7-day period. There's going to be $750,000 worth of incentives per month on this particular initiative. So it's essentially an arbitration opportunity where you can get your Thor out of this pool at a market rate, bond it, and then get discounted Thor here. And that's going to incentivize the movement of liquidity, or this liquidity suck from THORChain into Sushi. That's going to create additional volume and then reduce the total pooled within THORChain. Once THORSwap have their SLP, they can do a number of different things with it. They can keep the SLP to get rewards from it, so the sushi token rewards and onset rewards. They can buy ownership into more pools within THORChain, deepening the pools, or they can split the SLP and use it to expand their treasury. Then we have ERC20 Rune single-sided bonding, which is ETH.Rune circulating somewhere in ETH land, and you can take your ETH.Rune, use that to bond in and get cheap Thor. Once THORSwap get that ERC20 rune, then they can upgrade that to native rune, so that gets burnt, that gets created, and that can go towards the creation of new nodes that would increase the total bond, deepen pools within THORChain, and they want to buy more of the Thor rune pool, which means two things: it adds more volume because there'll be an asymmetrical addition of rune, and then it would make Thor deflationary because THORSwap essentially buying back their own token. They can also use that to bootstrap or deepen new pools, even though THORChain Treasury will usually do that, but they can assist in that process, or they can use that to expand their treasury. There are $500,000 of incentives per month going into this that would then reduce the ERC20 rune supply and convert that into native rune. Lastly, we have Rune ETH. And this is where you take your Rune ETH SLP from Sushi, bond that in to get discounted Thor over the same vesting period. There's $250,000 worth of incentives per month for this one. And with the SLP token that THORSwap get, they can take the Rune component and upgrade that to do any one of these four things we talked about before. They can use parts of that to bootstrap new pools or also to expand their treasury. Additionally, as we said before, previously, a lot of incentives will go into this pool, which meant no one wanted to leave this pool because they're having insane APY. So in addition to the bonding programs I talked about, THORSwap have created their own incentive pendulum in order to govern the incentives that are between LPs and farming emissions here. You can read about the article here, and this talks about their incentive pendulum. This is very different to the THORChain one, and how the pool is inefficient and what they're doing in order to control the incentives. So this particular incentive and pendulum from THORSwap, combined with the bonding of the three separate bonds mechanisms that I talked about, are like a package, and they're designed to remove some of that liquidity out of THORChain and then reducing the circulating supply of ERC20 rune. Right, so the scheme has been in place for about 7 days now, the time recording, and let's just see how it's going. And we can see here that there is a gradual decline of liquidity within the Thor pool, within THORChain. If we go over to these charts, and you can see that the liquidity is progressively increasing inside of the SushiSwap pools and demonstrating the movement of liquidity from THORSwap through to SushiSwap. If we look at the real-time data here, we can see that the Thor pool used to be 18% and now it's about 11%. Previously we looked at it was on the 8th of December. THORSwap tell me that the pool has dropped about 50% from $43 million to about $20 million in depth. So if you have a look at the data, on the 7th of December, it was 42 million. That's when we're looking at our graphs as well previously. And at the moment, it is 19.4 million. So that's on the money there. There's clearly a shift of liquidity out of this pool and moving that into SushiSwap. So that's a lot to take in. Let's just take a minute to recap the benefits for THORChain and THORSwap. So THORChain will get its total pool reduced due to the movement of liquidity out. Increased volume as the liquidity shifts. Also, because THORSwap will buy some of that pool asymmetrically, there's going to be additional volume there as well. And total bonded will increase when THORSwap deploys its nodes. Understand they want to deploy at least 2 nodes. Lastly, the reduction of ETH.Rune or ERC20 rune. THORSwap will gain a lot of liquidity because they will gain POL or protocol owned liquidity through its bonding, and it can be used in a number of different ways. So 1, to create new nodes, which they'll get the rewards from. 2, to bootstrap or deepen pools within THORChain. 3, to buy Thor rune pool within THORChain, and then getting the sushi and onset rewards for its treasury. And lastly, to expand its treasury based off the tokens or LP tokens that it gets. So it certainly is a mutually beneficial scheme for THORChain and THORSwap. THORSwap, as I said, big OG of the THORChain community, and I'm happy to see this mutually beneficial program happening. Thanks for watching. I hope this gives you an idea of what the THORSwap and Olympus Pro partnership is doing to address the caps issue and to retire the ETH.rune in circulation. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time, thanks, bye.